It's time to show you guys that this car has a split personality. It's like kind of a dual type thing. It's really cool. You guys are going to like this video. Let's get started.
Okay, Wizard, does your car have like a complex or something? You know, it's a Cadillac, it's got Corvette parts on it, and then you put the Stingray fender cover on it? Come on.
Well, it basically is a C6 underneath, and we're going to see that today. My car is literally going to be beside itself. It looks really strange. But before we dive into that, let's head on over to the engine I just finished up. So here is my LH2 NORTHSTAR engine that J&J Auto Wrecking in Ohio sent me. There is a link in the description if you're curious about some XLR parts. Actually, here's a quick little video of one they just received that was in a hurricane. I don't know, but I think it was actually in the ocean. Check this out, guys. Wasn't that pretty cool? And like I said in the first video we did on the XLR, they have almost 40 of these things. Maybe they do have 40 XLRs. So if you're in the market for XLR parts, J&J is the place to go. Also for any other supercar, exotic, Corvettes, all kinds of things like that. They got parts, and parts. Jake from NORTHSTAR Performance did send me the head stud and the main stud upgrade for this engine. The link to their website is also in the description. Thanks again to NORTHSTAR Performance and J&J Auto Wrecking. I have finished installing the head studs and the main studs. I've also resealed the bottom end. The only thing I have left is the rear main seal. Once I get this off the engine stand here, then I'll be able to actually install the rear main seal. But this engine sits here right now bulletproofed. I do have to put together the valve covers, intake, and all that stuff, all the accessories. I got the new timing chains, new guides, new tensioners. Everything is brand new as far as timing's concerned. I have a new thermostat, new water pump. All that stuff's going to be brand new. All new seals, all new gaskets. I also put the timing cover on with a brand new gasket. It's a metal gasket, but it has a little bead, like a rubber bead around the inside. And although those are pretty good gaskets, those are known to leak on these engines. So the fix for that as well is the gray GM silicone. As you can see, there's a little bead of it all around the timing cover. There's some right there. And so I coated the metal portion of the gasket with this GM sealant and torqued it all together, got it all on there. So it's double sealed, or double gasketed, I should say now. So I shouldn't have to worry about head gaskets blowing or oil leaks, which are so common on the NORTHSTAR engines. That'll be gone. So we're going to take a peek here. I got a bunch of red assembly lube all on the cams and everything to help it out when I first start it. But let me show you the head studs. Get this little wire out of the way. You can see one there. All these here are now head studs. No more head bolts. So that is a great, huge upgrade to this engine. The biggest upgrade you can do, really. And as you can see, they do sit a little higher than the head bolts. But as you can see, they sit in between the lobes. Nothing's going to contact. Everything is perfectly fine. They're actually a very long distance away from the cams. So that's not going to be an issue at all there. So the really hard part is over with now, and that is drilling and tapping and all the labor to get this engine bulletproof. That took quite a while to get that done. So that part's done. Now comes the fun part. You guys are going to really enjoy this. We're going to literally split my car in half. Some of you that are aficionados with Corvettes, the C5, the C6, even kind of the C4 in a way, you already know what it's like to separate the powertrain from the body. You've already seen it. But for those of you who are not aware of this, this is going to be really, really cool. Let's head on over to the XLR. So Danielson has gone through and unbolted everything and disconnected all the wiring and got everything ready to separate the body from the powertrain. It's going to be the easiest way to do an engine swap on this thing because I can get to all the accessories and everything and make it a lot easier and a lot less stressful. And it's just as fast. Once we get this up in the air, I'll show you some more things. But are you guys ready for this weird, it's not carnage really, but it's almost like opening up someone's chest for open heart surgery. It's really weird. So, here we go. Make sure nothing's catching. Isn't that crazy, guys? It's kind of like the joke, you know, you tell somebody, oh, it was so crazy, I was beside myself. This car is literally like split into two people, two personalities. Like, is this the car or is that the car? Which part of this is the car? Neither can work without the other. It's really, really strange. It's kind of like a mind, you know what. So I'm going to show you guys around this powertrain and show you why it was a lot easier to do it this way. But this is a very common thing with C5, C6, C7 Corvettes. When there's major work to be done, this is how you do it. I actually sent some pictures like this to friends and they're like, why is that necessary? It's like, bro, this is Corvette life. This is the way it is. I mean, so let's take a look at this. So here we are at the front of the engine, and you can see, just as been the bane of many Corvettes for many years, is the steering rack literally sits right in front of the engine. It's literally 1 inch, roughly 1 inch away from the main pulley. So even if I disconnect the bell housing bolts, there really is not enough room to move the engine forward and pull it out. I could remove the rack and do all that and possibly get it out, but then you got your ABS module in the way. A lot of the accessories, the power steering pump and things, are so hard to get to while it's in the car. It makes sense to just drop the entire powertrain. Then I can sit on a stool and peacefully take this thing apart. Not throwing wrenches, not getting mad. It just makes it that much easier. So I told you it had a rear main seal leak, and it definitely does. You can actually see it on the floor there. There's already dripping, even the engine not even running. But the oil pan down here, you can see it's just got oil dripping. It's coming from the rear main seal and just dripping down. Once we get this engine removed, I'll take it all apart and show you guys that there were some bolts that were stripped out. Somebody else has been in here before, and I just don't trust this engine. So you guys notice when I was lifting the body off this powertrain, there's lots of big connectors, bulkhead connectors. This is like transmission and brake lights and all kinds of things that goes to the rear of the vehicle. You saw that kind of fall when I was lifting this. Here's the engine. It basically just disconnects from the body, and you don't have to disconnect everything on the engine. You just disconnect the main harness connectors and lay them on top. It's actually made to come apart this way. They designed it to be this way, and it's not as bad as you think it is. So I will have to disconnect everything as far as the wiring and connectors from this engine and switch it over to the bulletproofed engine. This engine's going to go up in storage and just be mothballed. I'm going to save it per parts and things. One thing I noticed when I put the oil pump back onto the bulletproof engine is it specifically says on it, rear wheel drive. There's some parts like that are going to be harder to come by as time goes on. There's lots of pieces and parts of these LH2 that are not on every other NorthStar. One thing that's interesting I found on the catalytic converters on these is that you can't replace just the cat. You can see it's not bolted to the exhaust manifold. It's literally brazed on. There's no bolts there. There's nothing. So if the cats go bad, you have to buy the entire manifold, all of it, everything. That's very common on cars anymore. They put the cat so close to the manifold and actually make it part of the manifold So you can't just replace the cat. And that's also why a lot of times you get an estimate for a cat replacement. It can be $2 or $3 grand because these things are so expensive with the complete assembly like that. So the next thing that needs to be done is to actually separate this rear transmission and tunnel here from the engine, which is on this bell housing here. You can see one bolt's already been loosened up by Danielson. He started looking at things and checking it out. But there's bolts along the bell housing. On a normal car that we think of, the transmission actually is right here. And there's the bell housing bolts that bolt the transmission to the engine. But on the Corvettes and the XLRs, the transmission is back there.
Wow, Wizard, this is a really long shaft.
Yeah, this is a girthy boy here. You guys saw a video I did on a C5 Corvette where we did a clutch job, and I actually was sitting on it like that. It was kind of funny. So this is the transaxle here. This is the differential and transmission all in one. The torque converter's right here. It's not up there. Up there is just a flywheel for the starter to engage with, and also a connection of the torque tube or the drive shaft that goes through this tube. And then there's a plate inside of here that hooks to the torque converter. Whenever you take this thing down, you think you have to unhook so many things, but you really don't. A lot of the transmission cooler lines and hoses and things of that nature stay with the powertrain. Like I said, it's designed to come out this way. The only place we disconnected the brake lines was at the master cylinder. You can see that it's not tight, it's not hurting this, but you can see that this is one of the brake hoses. There's the brake line. Here's some brake lines here. They go up to the front. It all comes down with this drivetrain. So now we've got the lower portion or the lower personality of this car separated. Here's something that we rarely show is this big tunnel on these Corvettes and XLRs. It's very deep. So when you have your arm on the armrest up there in your driving, there's the shifter right there. Literally right below your arm is the torque tube. I mean, it's right there. Another thing that's so expensive on the XLRs, I'm not sure about the Corvettes, I think it's not so bad, but on the XLR it's a nightmare, is fuel pumps. There's two of them, and they each have their own floats for the fuel level indicator, and they can go bad, and it's almost $4,000 to replace the fuel pumps. Here's a fuel tank right here, and then there's another one over here, and they are connected up above by that tube. You cannot drop the tank or do anything without removing the tube, and you can't get to the tube unless you take this down. Now you don't have to remove all of this with the engine and everything. You just remove the transaxle and the torque tube disconnected from the engine, and the rear half of this can come down. But you have to take all that down to get these fuel tanks down. There's no way to cut holes or anything like that up and top. There's no way to really get to it. So it's a major, major job to do fuel pumps on here. Now my fuel gauges are working perfectly, and as long as you keep something like Techron or BG44K in the fuel, it'll help keep the contacts on the fuel floats happy, and you really won't have that problem. The fuel pumps are fine, they're doing just fine. It only has 63,000 miles on this car, so I'm really not going to mess with the fuel pumps right now. If I do have to in the future, it's going to suck, but I'm not going to mess with it right now. So since we're on the upper personality of this car, you can see that the forward portion of an XLR, there's really not much there. Just two frame horns and a radiator. And that's about it. So you notice we haven't seen the rear portion of the exhaust. We do have the X-pipe laying over there, but this is the rear section, and while it was out, I did the common mod that guys do with Corvettes, is I actually did a butterfly incision, almost like surgery, and opened these up and pulled the stuffing and whatnot out, and there's some pipes like that go all through this thing. I just cut the pipes and then weld this back together. On the C6 Corvette, it makes it extremely loud, but on the XLR, it'll make it just a little louder. It won't make it obnoxious. I don't want it obnoxious. But it's a quick mod that really didn't cost anything. I don't have to spend $1,500 on a special brand exhaust in the back. I just do that and it's going to sound really good. So That part's been taken care of.
Wizard, what are you doing? This is a Cadillac, not a Mustang. You can't ride it like a horse.
Can you imagine, guys, if you could set this up like a motorcycle, have like a seat and some pegs and things? Man, it would probably literally just fly up with so much power there's no weight. That would be fun. But obviously we're not going to do that. So all joking aside, we do have everything separated. Danielson's now going to remove this motor, swap over the accessories and things to the bulletproof motor, put it back together, and then we can sandwich them back together again. We don't use jack stands a whole lot in the shop. They're in our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We do get a small cut of that. We really do appreciate when you guys buy stuff from our affiliates program there. But the jack stands are definitely necessary on this job. You can put the wheels on and actually kind of let it rest on the wheels, but we wanted it stationary and strong and solid and safe so it doesn't fall. Oh, and one last thing that's really crazy about these XLRs. The alternator is liquid cooled. There's two hoses right here. There's no fins on the alternator. Coolant goes through it and cools it. I imagine that's probably not cheap. That's probably not cheap at all. So anyways, you guys got to see what it's like basically on a Corvette or an XLR when you split the powertrain from the body. A lot of people have mentioned I should LS swap this thing, but it would be so much work. I know a couple people that have done it. And in order to make all the body control modules and everything work with the wiring, with the LS ECM, it can control the transmission, but to get it to do now, it's just crazy. You have to literally pull the connectors apart, these big ones here, and pull every single wire out and go through and reroute, name every single wire and reposition them to match the LS ECM so that the rest of the car is happy. It's easy to think, I'll just throw the LS in and it just bolts up and you're done, right? Wrong. The BCM and all the features in this thing will go nuts. They will not be happy with you. There'll be warning lights everywhere. XLRs are known to have some electrical problems, and the last thing I need is to complicate that even further by putting a hodgepodge together and trying to make it all work. I'm not going to do that. And like I mentioned in one of the videos before, it's not like this thing's a turd of an engine. Once it's been bulletproof, that's 320 horsepower. That's the power of an SS Camaro in the early 2000s. It's really good power. They go through all the trouble to put an LS2 in it and get 80 more horsepower. That's quite a bit more power, but it's not worth it. It's really not worth it. And no, I'm not going to manual swap my XLR while it's out. I'm not going to do that. I hate manuals. I'll leave Danielson to doing all the work on this and doing the swap over and everything. And then the next video that we do on this will show mating it back together and show how all that goes. But I knew you guys would enjoy seeing it come apart. It's really kind of interesting. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to do this, including the jack stands, check our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut and we really appreciate it. And make sure to hit the subscribe button because there's so many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.